This is the older woman I'm talking about. People often say that life introduces you to certain souls at the exact moment. You need them, sometimes too soon, sometimes too late, and sometimes right when your heart has forgotten how to feel anything at all. For me, it happened on an ordinary evening, inside a quiet corner of an old city library, where dust floated like tiny memories in the sunbeams. That is where I first saw her, the older woman I'm talking about. She wasn't the kind of woman who demanded attention. She didn't wear bright colors or heavy perfume. She was simple in a way that felt royal. At first, I thought she was just another visitor searching for a forgotten book on a forgotten shelf. But there was something about the way she stood, still, calm, as if she carried her own world inside her. Something that made my heart pause before remembering how to beat again. She looked up only once, and in that moment, everything else in the library dissolved. Her eyes weren't young, but they were alive with stories she had lived, storms she had survived, and secrets she had buried like gold in the sand. She smiled politely before turning away, but that single smile stayed with me all night, echoing somewhere deep inside my chest. For weeks I didn't know her name. I only knew her presence. Some days she came early and left quickly. Other days she stayed until the lights dimmed. She always sat by the same window seat, 14, the spot where the late sunlight kissed the wooden table. She read in silence, pages turning like soft whispers. Her fingers were gentle, careful, as if every book she touched contained a piece of her own life. And then one day, fate, strange and playful as always, decided to cross our paths. She dropped a paper, a folded note that slipped from her book as she walked away. I picked it up, intending to return it, but curiosity won. It wasn't a personal letter. It was a poem, handwritten. Every line carried the weight of someone who had loved deeply and lost painfully. I loved once, it said, not with the heart of a girl, but with the soul of a woman. Who knew the cost of love? I stood frozen, reading it again and again. It felt like the paper held part of her heartbeat. The next day, I returned it to her. She looked surprised that someone had found it, but even more surprised that someone had read it. I expected her to be upset, but she wasn't. She simply nodded and said, "When you write with truth, someone is always meant to read it." That was the first conversation we ever had. Short, simple, soft, but powerful enough to pull me into her orbit. From that day onward, we talked, sometimes about books, sometimes about life, sometimes about nothing and everything at the same time. She carried wisdom like jewelry effortlessly. And the more I listened to her, the more I realized that age had not taken anything from her. It had given her a kind of beauty young hearts. After that first conversation, something shifted between us, something unspoken but unmistakable. I began to notice things I had overlooked before. The tiny crease on her forehead when she read something emotional, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the gentleness in her voice when she shared a memory. She wasn't like the women my age. She didn't rush. She didn't pretend. She didn't need to impress anyone. She simply existed, fully, gracefully, with a quiet confidence born from surviving life rather than escaping it. But it wasn't until one particular evening that I truly began to understand her. The library was almost empty that day. Rain tapped softly against the windows, filling the silence with a slow rhythm. She sat in her usual place, seat 14, reading a book with a faded blue cover. I hesitated before approaching her, unsure if I was crossing a line I didn't know existed. But then she looked up and smiled, and suddenly the whole world seemed a little less complicated. "Sit," she said gently, not as an invitation, but as if she already knew I would. I took the seat across from her and noticed the book she was reading. It was a love story, an old one, dog-eared and fragile. "You like romance?" I asked. She closed the book quietly. "I like truth," she replied, "and sometimes the truest things in life come wrapped in love stories." There was something in her tone, soft yet heavy, that made me ask the question I had kept inside for weeks. "Did you ever love someone that deeply?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared out the window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass. Her silence wasn't uncomfortable. It carried the weight of memories she wasn't sure she wanted to revisit. Finally, she spoke. "I loved once," she said slowly. "Enough to give up everything I had. Enough to break myself and still hope he would hold the pieces." Her words felt like a story, a wound, and a confession all at once. "What happened?" I whispered. She smiled, a sad, distant smile. "Life," she said. "Sometimes life chooses for you." She didn't explain further, and I didn't push her. But I felt it, an invisible river of pain beneath her calm surface. A story waiting to be told, but only when the heart was ready. For weeks afterward, we grew closer. Not in the loud, dramatic way love stories usually unfold, but softly, like a sunrise slowly filling the sky. She began sharing little things about her life. She loved jasmine tea. She wrote poetry, but rarely showed it to anyone. She believed every person carried two versions of themselves, the one the world saw, and the one they kept hidden. She had dreams she never pursued because life had forced her in a different direction. But there was one thing she never told me: her age. Not because she wanted to hide it, but because it didn't matter, not to her, and slowly not to me either. One day I asked her why she always sat by the window. Light. It was a rainy evening again when the story fully revealed itself. She had asked me to meet her outside the library this time, near the old fountain in the park, where water shimmered like liquid glass under the streetlights. I arrived early, heart pounding, not with the nervousness of young love, but with the anticipation of meeting someone whose very presence had already transformed my life. When she appeared, she was wearing a coat that seemed too light for the weather. She didn't complain about the cold. She never did. But her eyes carried the weight of years I could only imagine. We walked in silence, following the curved path of the park. Each step seemed purposeful, yet gentle, as if she moved to her own rhythm, one the world had yet to understand. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions about her past, about her loves, her losses, and her life before me. But I sensed she would only answer when the moment was right. Finally, we reached a quiet bench under an ancient oak tree. She sat down, patting the empty space beside her. I joined her, feeling a strange mix of comfort and anticipation. "Do you want to know my story?" she asked softly. I nodded. I didn't need to speak. I had waited for this moment more than I knew. She took a deep breath and began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was married once," she said. Not happily, not tragically. Just quietly. I loved a man who didn't understand how to love me the way I needed. I lost myself trying to fit into a life that was never mine. I had dreams, ambitions, and desires, but they were swallowed by responsibilities, by people, by expectations. And one day I woke up and realized I had forgotten who I was. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. After that, I chose to be alone, not because I didn't want love, but because I wanted to find myself first. Life is cruel to those who rush into it. I learned patience the hard way. She paused and looked at me. Her gaze was steady, intimate, yet fearless. Then you came along, and somehow, without saying much, you reminded me that life could still have beauty, that love could exist without pretense, that I could be more than a memory or a shadow of what I once was. I was silent, afraid that words would shatter the fragile honesty between us. She had bared her soul, revealing the hidden chapters of her life, chapters that most people never saw. And yet there she was, not asking for pity, not asking for sympathy, only sharing the truth that made her who she was. I am older than you, she continued, but that doesn't mean I am weaker. I've lived, I've failed, I've fallen, and I've learned that strength isn't measured in years or appearances, but in the courage to stand, to hope, to love again, even when it seems impossible. It was then I realized that the woman I had admired from afar, the older woman I had been drawn to for weeks, was not just older in age. She was older in wisdom, in